So I think I got the audio issues worked out. Let me know if I sound any better than I did in the last video. On to the build though. We start them all the same. We're just going to cut everything out and get them cleaned up. You guys might also notice my thumb. This video is also a truly inspiring documentary on watching a wound heal for the next 19 minutes. And I do need to point out that Revell just might be getting this whole modeling thing figured out. Instead of giving us these tiny little bumps and holes to line up, they're giving us tabs and splines, and things are just fitting a whole lot better than they usually do. And once we get about here, we're just going to go in and clean up the mating surfaces. The idea is to not remove material, just make sure everything's flat so they fit better. As you'll see here, see that tiny little tab sticking out there? Now, it may look like I'm doing a lot of sanding here, but this nail file is extremely worn out. It is barely removing any material. But after a while, you'll see that is now smooth and flat. So with all the mating surfaces now cleaned up, we can start putting this thing mostly together. And this is what I was talking about earlier. They're giving us these actual tabs and splines to line everything up, and they fit extremely well. Now to some it may seem like I'm going rather far into the assembly here, but this is all painted the same color. Might as well glue it all in now, just to be more convenient later on. Now on this rear transaxle here, that's right, this is the transmission on this car. Look at that, that seam just disappeared. It pains me to say this, but man, Tamiya, Revell is coming for you. You guys remember the unboxing when I said I thought something was missing here? Something is missing. Lucky for me, these bags that all the sprues come in, I never throw them away. As you guys have seen me do, and will also see me do later, I just use these bags just to save masking tape. They could cover a large area, and they don't hurt the paint. Anywho, we got our part. I'm going to fold these up because I will be using these later. Guys, do not throw these bags away. Save them. Now that we got everything scavenged up, we got to talk about how these fit. Flawlessly. These went together better than any Tamiya exhaust I put together. It's got one very large spline that slots in place. If you didn't just see me put that together, you guys would think that's one molded piece. Ironically though, it doesn't fit the engine that well. So while the glue is still wet, I'm just going to mount it into the engine here to act as a jig to hold everything in place where it's supposed to go. Now with all the glue dry, we could finally move on to add some color. Now for the base coat, I'm doing everything here in Tamiya XF16, just some flat aluminium. For the exhaust components, I'm going to attempt to do some light heat staining and tarnishing. As you'll see in the background there, I got some Tester's Gold, and I'm just holding the brush way far back and just misting it on. There's a quick glimpse of how all those parts look once that has had a bit of time to dry. If you guys remember the video I just put out a few days ago about textured paint and how I made my own, I'm using that same method here to replicate the textured powder coating on the intake and the valve covers. To be completely honest with you guys, I did not have high hopes for this, which is why I done all that testing on the spoons. And I got to thinking about, I just have a huge pile of Ferraris that I need to build, and almost all of them have the intakes and valve covers like this. So I'm going to purchase some micro balloons soon to use that in the mix instead of baby powder. So stay tuned for that testing next time I build a Ferrari. And for those of you who are just completely clueless as to what I'm talking about right now, 2 or 3 days ago I put out a 4-minute video. Go give it a quick watch. It'll catch you up to speed. From there, I just painted the coil packs and some of the electronics in black and silver. You'll see the silver later. To be honest, I'm not really sure why I went the extra mile here. I'm painting these CV boots in that rubber black. In a minute, you'll see that I actually painted the CV shafts in a gloss black. And then finally, you'll see that I do the hubs in a gold to replicate that zinc plating these things have. All of this will be hidden. Once it's assembled, none of this will be visible. So why am I doing it? Well, things gotta look pretty for that thumbnail to draw your guys' attention so you'll click on this and watch these videos. Or maybe it's a sense of pride in doing it right. No, it cannot be pride. It can't be. Because I am not going to wire up this engine. The vast majority of this engine will be covered with a huge intake manifold. So this time around, I am not going to waste my time or material to wire up an engine that's barely going to be visible. That and I broke some micro drill bits trying to do it already, and it failed. So we're not doing it. To make up for it though, I'm going to make this chassis a bit more accurate. These need to be molded open, as you'll see right here. Yeah, it's kind of saddening, but this is the only picture I could find of the undercarriage of a 599 GTO. The front bit was easy. I could just hog out a lot of that material here with my sprue cutters. Then we'll just sand everything smooth to clean up our cutting marks. Now the rear section, it was a little bit more involved. So I just used the back of my X-Acto and just scribed it all out very, very slowly. And scribing it out actually kind of gave me cleaner lines. I barely had to do any sanding to clean that up. Since I did cut it out though, we lost that front mounting tab for the exhaust. That's no big deal though. As you'll see there, we got 2 mounting tabs, 1 in the middle, plus 2 for the exhaust manifold. So cut that center section out and make this exhaust look better. You guys remember what I was saying about saving all your sprue bags earlier? Yeah, this is why. Just makes things like this a little bit more easy. What I'm doing here though is I'm painting that center section on the chassis, all the hubs, and the very bottom of the interior tub in some decanted TS17, some Tamiya silver. And yes, since I cut that out, this will now be visible, so we got to paint it silver just so it looks like there's some heat shielding up in there. So after a second coat there, we can do one of my favorite parts, and that is peeling off masking tape. Truly, I enjoy this. Masking is methodical and time consuming. So at the end of the day, when you peel it all up and you see exactly what you're going for, it is just extremely rewarding. And again, since we cut that center section out on the chassis, well, this torque tube is going to be visible. So I'm just going to give it a nice coat, a semi-gloss black. And since I had paint on a brush, it only made sense to paint the steering linkage here as well. And for those of you that completely forgot this is actually a documentary, look, my thumb is almost completely healed now. So I watched this segment here about 20 times, thinking of a script and way to word what I'm doing here. Very short answer is, I have no idea why I did this. What this is though, this is a radiator, and what I'm doing is I am cutting off as much of the fins as I can, then I'm going to sand it completely flush and smooth. Since I spent money on a photo etch, I want to use as much of it as I can, but I do not want to completely build a new radiator. So what we got here, this is the front and the back of the radiator. Then over here, we put all these slats together to essentially create a grid or a grill. They're also very kind to give us some fans, but looking over here, that is just a lot of work, and I'm not going to do it. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off just one of these faces here, and I'm going to glue it to the front of that, I'm going to glue it to the front of the radiator there. Now, why am I not going to waste my time? Because once the radiator is assembled, all you will see is just what you see through the fans there. To make it worse, once you mount it in the shroud, you won't see it at all. So you guys might be asking, why am I going through the trouble just to mount the face of the radiator there? Well, as I mentioned earlier, things have to look pretty for the thumbnails. So, yeah, let's do the thing I just said I was going to do. Now I'm using the gel type super glue just because it takes a little bit longer to dry and it gives me some time to position this, which is a good thing because it's kind of slipping and sliding all around. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is all we're ever going to see of that radiator again. Now onto the front of the car. I got a little ahead of myself and I forgot to install the steering linkage. Luckily, I was able to save it about here and still get it installed. From here, assembly is just extremely straightforward. Everything has some slots that they slide into. They're kind of a tight fit, but everything fits extremely well. You guys remember earlier when I was talking about how almost nothing on this engine will be visible? We don't even have pulleys or belts or anything on the front of this engine. We got to talk about this piece. This is the oil reservoir for the dry sump oiling system on this car. The spout on this thing, the little whatever that is, that lines up on a very precarious spot on the body, and it's not even visible. So I accidentally lost that piece. I don't know what happened to it. Now, it's times like this when I kind of feel like I should bring the music back sometimes. And it's for times like this when I'm just putting everything together and it just doesn't always need commentary, so I don't always have stuff to say. Maybe not though. Those ASMR videos, whatever the hell that stands for, those things are fairly popular these days, so maybe no music, maybe no talking. Who knows? Now, those of you with a keen eye may have noticed that I am not installing the shocks or the springs for the suspension. They are a coilover design and they look extremely good. And the sad thing is, once we get the wheels on, you guys will never see them. So I set them aside and I'm going to use them for a future project where they will be seen. And speaking of not being seen, here is that radiator assembly that leans towards the engine, so you guys won't even see that photo etch down in there. But you know how it is. Thumbnails and clickbait, all that good stuff. That is it though, guys. That is the engine and chassis assembled here. So if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching and have a good night.